Hello, my dear audience. Today we're gonna visit a house that needs no introduction. It's considered by many as Frank Lloyd Wright's best work. Not only is it one of the most famous buildings in the United States, it's also one of the most iconic designs in the world. This video shows an overview of the construction and a complete walkthrough of the interior. But before that, we're gonna take a look at where it all started. Why was this house built in the first place? Fallingwater is also known as Kaufman House because it was the dream project of Edgar Kaufman. This very wealthy man was the founder of the Kaufman department store in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. With money earned through this successful store, Kaufman already owned a luxury mansion in Pittsburgh. While Kaufman lived in this house from Monday till Friday, he went into camping trips each weekend. During one of these camping trips, he discovered the ideal vacation spot. An isolated place next to the waterfall of the small Bear Run River. It was a remote location, a few miles outside the rural town of Mill Run, and more than an hour driving from Pittsburgh. Kaufman fell in love with this location, and he built a small wooden cabin on it. In 1934, after owning the site for more than a decade, Kaufman thought it was time to replace the cabin for a larger home. But which architect was the right person for the job? The answer came from Kaufman's son, Edgar Jr., who was an aspiring architect himself. In the summer of 1934, Edgar Jr. read Wright's autobiography, and within a few weeks he started an apprenticeship at Wright's office. Edgar Jr. brought his father in contact with Wright, and when Edgar Sr. visited Taliesin, he was so impressed that he trusted the architect with a large budget and complete creative freedom. A very important trivial fact is that Fallingwater is not the only masterpiece that was commissioned by the Kaufman family. Just as if one architectural icon was not enough, some 10 years later Edgar Kaufman asked Richard Neutra to design another brilliant vacation home. But this house will be the subject in another video. On the 18th of December 1934, Wright visited the location and he took inspiration from the landscape. However, the next 9 months, Wright suffered from a lack of inspiration and he couldn't come up with a suitable design. During these same 9 months, Wright bluffed a few times against Kaufman that he was already working on the design. In September 1935, Kaufman was for work obligations in Milwaukee, and he thought it was a great idea to surprise Wright with a visit at his home, which was located only 2 hours driving from Milwaukee. In the morning, Kaufman called Wright over the phone to inform him that he would come by in 2 hours. Knowing there was no way out for him, Wright then calmly drew the initial plans in the same time that a car trip from Milwaukee to Taliesin takes. It's amazing that this house was designed in only 2 hours, and it's unbelievable that it was built almost 90 years ago. But how was it constructed? Kaufman wanted to place the house below the waterfall. Wright, however, designed the house cantilevering over the waterfall. He did this because he believed that people should stay as close to nature as possible. Therefore, the waterfall had to be part of the house. The first step in the construction process was creating a flat surface on which the house could be partially placed. The second step was the installation of 4 very strong concrete bolsters, placed half on the water and half on the shore. The lowest part of the rock-stone wall in the rear was built. Each bolster supports a horizontal reinforced concrete beam that extends 15 feet beyond the bolster. The beams are connected to one another by concrete joists. Together, the beams and joists create a rectilinear grid. The open spaces in the skeleton were filled in with concrete slabs. The concrete has a smooth surface from underneath because the slabs were connected to the lower edge of the beams and joists. The edges of the floor have concrete balustrades. They give extra rigidity because they hold the beams in place from the outside of the construction. The actual floor consists of thin wooden plates that were laid over the skeleton. Over the plates, flagstone tiles were placed. The masonry wall at the back was extended higher, and at the front steel pillars were placed. At the left side of the house, the construction of the tower and chimney was started. The second floor level was placed over this construction. This floor level was again a skeleton with slabs placed in the spaces between the beams. The concrete bars in the rear extend way beyond the backside of the house, forming a pergola over the driveway. Finally, the bars enter the rocky hillside. This distributes the weight of the second floor level towards the rock, reducing the pressure on the first floor level. A series of steel pillars was erected and the masonry walls in the back were extended vertically. The construction of the chimney and tower made again progression. The third floor level is resting on this construction, and again some beams are connected to the rocky hillside. Then the construction approached the end with the masonry of the third floor level and a third series of steel pillars. The tower and chimney was now elevated to the highest point. The final roof was constructed. The tower and chimney at the left side play an important role in construction because each floor level is supported with beams placed deep in the stone walls of the tower. The foundation of the tower is placed safely in the rock, making it very safe, and therefore it forms some kind of vertical backbone to the floor levels. Seen from the front, the cantilevering balconies look almost free-floating and very dangerous, but in fact they only cantilever for a small part. For the majority, they are safely resting on the pillars, the beams that are placed in the tower, the walls in the back, the foundations, and on the rock. What many people believe is the backside of the house is more a central vertical axis. By making each floor level smaller than the previous one, the weight is distributed safely, making the house very stable. The final step in the construction process was to build the interior and to place the many windows. This drawing shows how the many balconies are placed above each other, and again they become lesser wide towards the top. The first balcony rests directly on the foundation. The second rests on the first floor level. At the right is a balcony that rests on the rockstone wall. The third part is more a rooftop terrace. There's also a large horizontal canopy that provides shadow over the balconies of the second floor level. The balcony at the left is completely resting on another rock. The supporting beams of this balcony extend at the backside of the rock. The house has a covered bridge that goes over the driveway towards the hillside. The floor of the bridge is made of the construction beams of the second floor level, and the ceiling is supported by beams from the third floor level. This drawing shows the backside of the house. You can't see it in reality because the view is obstructed by the rock. In the middle is the entrance of the covered bridge. While the idea of this house was born in only 2 hours, it took more than 7 months to draw the entire design. From September 1935 till March 1936, Wright was busy with all the difficult calculations. After all the drawings were finished, the construction started in April 1936. The construction process was extremely daring and experimental for its time, Especially the working with caustic concrete caused many delays. The process was also plagued with conflicts between Wright and Kaufman. For instance, Kaufman was afraid that Wright's cantilevering design was not safe enough, and without informing Wright, he commissioned the contractors to build steel pillars underneath the balcony. Wright took this distrust as an offense, even threatening to withdraw from the project and leaving the house unfinished if Kaufman wasn't removing the pillars. Finally, Kaufman relied on Wright's engineering capabilities, and the steel pillars were removed. It lasted till December 1938 till the main house was finished. Despite all their conflicts, Kaufman and Wright kept in good terms with each other, and Wright was rehired the following year to design a guest house higher on the hill. This guest house had a more conventional and less daring design, and it was constructed in only a few months in 1939. The estimated cost of the house was originally $35,000. However, the construction went 4 times over budget, with a final cost of $155,000, which would be $3 million in today's money. Not only the construction was expensive, also the annual maintenance costs have always demanded a lot of fortune. Because of the humid conditions and freezing winters, the concrete constantly needs to be repaired. This makes the house very unsustainable. After many decades, the concrete was so worn out that in 2002 an entire new foundation had to be placed under the house. Hopefully, this will preserve the house for the future. Despite everything, Edgar Kaufman fell in love with his own house, and he spent as much time as possible there. After he passed away in 1955, the property was inherited by his only son, Edgar Jr. He decided to share the house with the rest of the world, and he donated the building to the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, making it an actual museum that is open for public. Nowadays, Fallingwater welcomes more than 150,000 visitors each year. For those who never had the chance to visit, I made this video. So let's take a look inside. We start our tour at the street. From here, only a sign indicates the location. The rest of the house is hidden behind the trees. We walk over the old driveway. From here, the house slowly reveals itself. We go over a small bridge that makes it possible to enter the house. Fallingwater is a prime example of organic architecture. Organic architecture was invented by Wright, and it means architecture that mimics the shapes of nature and thus exists in harmony with the landscape. When we arrive at the backside of the house, we immediately see the first trademark of organic architecture. The nature is not disrupted. The trees that were already standing on the location weren't cut down, and instead of this, the concrete beams were built around them, so they continue to grow. The second trademark is the use of natural materials from the landscape. The walls were made of the rocks on the location, making it sometimes hard to see which part is man-made and what's organic. Before we enter the front door, I want to point out some interesting detail that's placed next to it. This small fountain was not only used as a bath to clean your bare feet, but it also produced the sound of falling water. Frank Lloyd Wright wanted that the sounds of nature were present everywhere in the house. The real sound of the waterfall was not audible all the way to the front door, so its substitute was the sound of a small fountain. After we open the front door, it is time to look at the floor plan. I colored some parts of the floor plan to separate the inside parts from the many terraces and balconies. Here is a closer look. I decorated this drawing with furniture to give an indication of the size and layout of the first floor. First we step in the hallway, which has a toilet and a wardrobe next to it. and it has place for a small desk. There's a large opening towards the living room and you climb up a few steps to enter. The living room was used to entertain large groups of people. Because of this, the space is divided in separated areas for specific functions without having any internal walls. The music area is just a couch with a record player, but it was the only place in the house where you could listen to music. Directly behind it is the reading area. This place has a door towards the balcony and is sunlit from above by many skylights. It has a desk, and behind it is Mr. Kaufman's original reading chair. The large open space, combined with a low ceiling and stone walls, give the living room the feeling of a cave. Everything in the house is still in its original condition, from the furniture to the smallest details. Even the crockery and tableware is still original. A horizontal window brings extra sunlight in the backside of the living room. The meal from the kitchen could be brought in through a service hatch. Next to it is a door to the kitchen. The design of the house looks so modern that you hardly realize how old it actually is. Only the obsolete kitchen appliance reveal the true age of the house. This entrance was for the servants who had to cook for the family and who had to clean the house. When they didn't have to work, they could relax in a sitting room that was separated from the rest of the house. In the servants' room is also the stair towards the basement. The basement is relatively small, but it simply couldn't be larger because the space underneath is limited by the foundations, so it had to be cut out in the rock at the left side. In the basement is also the servants' toilet. It has one window, which you can see here at the outside. When we return to the living room, we see that the top of the rock comes through an opening in the floor and forms the bottom of the fireplace. This orange bowl is a large iron kettle that could be swung in front of the fireplace to boil water. The flagstone tiles are polished and their texture and color evokes the rimpled surface of the streaming water underneath the house. The living room is illuminated by a large light box with a wooden frame at the ceiling. The light from the many light bulbs is filtered by frosted glass, which imitates the feeling of daylight. There are two sitting areas. The small one has a private and enclosed feeling and is located next to the fireplace, while the large one has a panoramic feeling and provides a beautiful view over the forest. All the window frames in the house are painted red-brown because they blend in with the tree trunks outside. This creates the illusion that the nature enters the house and you're sitting in the forest. The many window frames also look a bit like Japanese rice paper walls. This, combined with the seat cushions and a low table, creates a strong Japanese feeling. This is not a coincidence. F.L Wright was inspired by Japanese interiors because he loved their large amounts of sunlight and the close relation to the landscape. Japanese houses have no central front door, and from everywhere you can slide open the walls into the nature. The many lines in the interior create a perspective that always leads the view outside. With its windows, lines and doors, Fallingwater is Frank Lloyd Wright's interpretation of the Japanese interaction between interior and landscape. This also explains the many balconies. Wright wanted that from everywhere in the house you could step outside in a matter of seconds, assuring that you are always close to the nature. This balcony is the only part of the house from where you can catch a small glimpse of the waterfall below. This brings us at the third trademark of organic architecture, the constant mixing between inside and outside, making it sometimes hard to see what's inside and what's not. Frank Lloyd Wright went so far in his desire to keep people in touch with nature that he even designed a stair that literally connects you with the waterfall. The Kaufman family first was reluctant to this idea because they didn't see the point of building a stair that seemingly leads to nowhere. But Wright demanded that it was built because this stair makes the distance between the waterfall and the interior just seconds away from each other. The opening of the staircase brings the sound of falling water inside, and you can sit on a platform with your feet in the water and looking at the streams. In true organic style, the lines of the water had to be unbroken, and therefore the stair hardly touches the water. It was made by hanging the steps underneath the house with steel arms, creating a floating stair. Even from here, it is difficult to see the actual waterfall, and from almost everywhere in the house, you can't see the waterfall either. Wright justified this by saying that something as spectacular as a waterfall could become boring if you could see it on a daily basis. To maintain its sense of excitement, it had to be hidden under the house, making it invisible and prominently present at the same time. When we go back into the house, we can see that the opening of the staircase can be covered with a glass slide lid. Next to it is a door towards the balcony. Next to the stair is the other side of the door towards the reading area, which we visited previously. From the balcony we can look down the stream or at the bridge, but we go more towards the back side of the house. When you look over the edge of the balcony, you see a strange wall below in the water. This wall forms the swimming pond. After walking down a narrow stair, you can have a safe dive in the water without the danger of being dragged by the strong current of the waterfall. Once we climb back to the balcony, we see a stair that leads to a higher floor level. We skip this stair but return to it later. Instead of climbing up, we become full circle by going to the front door, where we once entered the house. We return to the dining area and climb over the stair in the living room. This rockstone stair is partly opened towards the living room. Now we enter the second floor level. First you see the floor plan in correspondence with the rocks in the river. The level has 3 large balconies, facing in different directions, west, south and east. This makes it possible to sit in the sunshine at each moment of the day. We remove the part of the underlying floor level and colored the parts that are actually inside. We remove the balconies to see that the indoor spaces are actually quite small compared to the larger balconies. Let's take a closer look and decorate the layout with furniture to give an indication of the dimensions. We climb up a few steps and go to the first bedroom. The bedroom has its own bathroom, Like all other bathrooms, the walls are covered with cork tiles, which has the brownish color of the trees in the rocks. To enter the balcony of the first bedroom, you have to take a small walk through the hallway. Right behind the glass door is a small porch. Here is the stair that we saw previously. The stair connects the front door with the second floor level and makes it possible to enter the sleeping area without walking through the living room. Behind the stair is the east side balcony. Because the balcony goes all the way to the end of the house, you have a full panorama, and therefore it makes maximum use of the beautiful sight of the forest. Once we go back to the hallway, you might notice that the corridors are very narrow, feeling a bit like a medieval castle and almost claustrophobic. This was done deliberately by Wright because he wanted to create the feeling of suppression followed up by expansion. From the corridors you step into the large open space of the bedroom. Behind it is the balcony with even more space, giving the illusion of breaking out into the landscape. From the balcony of the master bedroom you have a beautiful view in 3 directions. F. L Wright wanted that straight from the bedroom you could walk to the edge of the balcony and see only the river below without seeing parts of the house. This would enlarge the feeling of living in the nature. Therefore the upper balcony had to be extended over the first floor. The extension also provided shadow over the windows of the living room. By making the second balcony narrower than the first one, the weight was lesser, despite the balcony being longer. To reduce extra weight, some parts of the skeleton were not filled in with floor plates. This created the skylights above the reading area. From the balcony we return to the master bedroom, the place where Mr. and Mrs. Kaufman once slept. Behind this wall is the bathroom. The bathrooms might seem plain and cheap for today's standards, but in the 1930s, a shower with hot water for each bedroom was very luxurious. We walk through the corridor and go to the third bedroom. At the other side of the bed is the entrance to the third bathroom. This space is sunlit by a narrow vertical window. Here you see the window from the outside. When we look at the window, we see how the continuity between interior and the outside is maintained. Rather than setting the windows in a vertical frame, the glass is set directly in the stone wall, which eliminates the visual barrier between the inside and the landscape. 2 windows come together in a corner, and here is also the vertical window frame missing. Especially when the small glass plates are opened, the corner seems to disappear. The many horizontal window frames lead the perspective outside. To provide a look outside while working and writing, the desk was placed very close to the window, even so close that the recess was cut out to swing open the window. Through this door we step outside and we walk over the balcony that's placed west of the house. Now I think it's important to point out a fourth element of organic architecture. This trademark is present all over the house. It's imitating the unpredictable shapes of nature. In landscapes, you never see any regularity or symmetry. While most modern architecture is known for its logic and repetition of shapes, organic architecture does the opposite, by houses that are laid out like landscapes, with irregular patterns of different shapes. This makes Fallingwater constantly look different from each angle, and visually very complex. There's a large outdoor stair that goes to the higher floor level, but we skip this stair and return to it later. Instead of this, we enter the third floor through the indoor stair. The walls of this staircase are covered with bookshelves. Here you see the third floor level with the other levels underneath. We remove the underlying structure. The yellow parts are the bridge and the canopy of the second floor level. This is the third floor level with no other parts of the house. We walk through the corridor and go to the fourth bedroom, which is very small. It's actually more an alcove with a bed in it. From here, we step through the glass door and enter the rooftop terrace. Here you see a planter with windows at the bottom. These are the clerestories of the bathroom below. Wright wanted that every room was filled with natural sunlight. Because the bathroom was surrounded by other rooms, the ceiling had to be extended to create clerestories. Like everything in the house, the rooftop terrace was designed for a special purpose. Because it looked over the treetops, it was used to look at the sky and the sunsets, something which was harder to see from the lower balconies. Now we return inside. Through the corridor, we walk past the fourth bathroom and we enter the study area or office. The study room looks very similar to the third bedroom and kitchen underneath. This is because all three of the spaces are placed above each other in one tower. And because of the supporting function of the tower, the strong walls cannot be changed. This creates exactly the same size for the three spaces. They have identical windows from floor to ceiling that are placed in a vertical line, like a ladder. F.L Wright did this because he wanted to have a vertical contrast to the many horizontal lines in the house, creating a very strong composition. From the office, we step outside to a small balcony. From here, we descend over the stair that brings us back to the lower balcony. We put the roof back on the third floor plan because I want to end the walkthrough of the main house with an overview of the many roofs and balconies on top of each other, to see how the combination of floor levels looks from above. Now we go to the covered bridge at the second floor level. It goes over the driveway and leads to the guest house. At the end of the tunnel, you see two elements of organic architecture at the same time. First, the point of the rock was not removed and the floor was built around it, so the rock enters a living space. And second, the planter continues at the other side of the glass. Both details blur the verge between interior and landscape. Behind the exit of the bridge is a short spiral staircase. When you climb up this stair, there is a pathway that goes over the hill towards the guest house. You can follow this pathway, but you can also turn to the left and enter the terrace that's placed on top of the bridge. This is the only terrace at the north side of the house. Here you can see the skylights that illuminate the covered bridge. Let's continue to climb up over the pathway. There's a roof over the stair. It prevents the steps becoming slippery on rainy or icy days. On sunny days, the shelter provides shadow. Interesting is that the steel pillars of the shelter are only placed at the left side of the concrete. By placing the shelter in a curve and connecting the beginning to the bridge and the end to the guest house, the thin concrete covering still balances perfectly. The shelter follows the elevation in the hillside, like the steps of a stair. Now we are arrived at the guest house, and we're gonna take a look at the layout. We removed the roof to see the floor plan. The guest house has a 2-person sleeping accommodation and even a small living room. Behind it is the 4-car garage. But first we're gonna walk under the concrete pergola towards the swimming pool. The vertical window frames in the corner are again missing. This again enlarges the feeling of space. The guest house has its own sitting room with a fireplace. The sitting room was mainly used for business meetings and to invite the associates of Mr. Kaufman, without interfering with the private quarters of the house. Because of the elevations in the hillside, the backside of the guest house is partly sunken in the ground level. Here you see an opening. Behind it is a staircase that leads to the 2nd floor level of the guest house. Above the garage were 3 bedrooms that were inhabited by 4 servants who worked and lived full-time in the house. They even had their own terrace where they could relax in the sun. The terrace was surrounded by high walls that prevent the employees from interfering with the rest of the house. Nowadays the bedrooms are no longer in their original condition and they are used as an office for the employees of the museum. From the backside of the main house you can walk over the driveway, around the hill and upwards to the garage. The garage once had place for 4 cars and had a laundry unit. Today, the garage is transformed into a cinema, which shows documentaries about the history of the house. Finally, we go to the place from where you can catch the iconic image of the house. From here, the structure looks like a continuation of the cascades of the waterfall. This brings us at the 5th and final trademark of organic architecture. Because the concrete is painted in light ochre, the house blends in with the background. During all 4 seasons, it looks like it is part of the nature. A young architect who worked for Mr. Wright was John Lautner. He was strongly influenced by Fallingwater and he designed many houses that took the principles of organic architecture to a whole new level. He even created his own version of Fallingwater with the Wolf House, some 25 years later. Not only John Lautner was influenced, Fallingwater has inspired thousands of other architects, and it will inspire many more in the future. making it one of the most important houses of the 20th century. This was your tour guidance. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.